He said, and this is an exact quote, before the end of this week, another 4 million tests will be distributed. As you know now, 6 weeks later, we still aren't at 4 million tests.
I don't know what to say.
With the testing.
Ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Again, I'll say it for the 5th time. We have tested more than any country in the world, and some of the countries are very big. Okay, more than any country in the world. We have one of the most successful, if you call, mortality rates, because one person, and I always say that for you in particular, one person is too many. But we've done very well. Our testing, if you add them all up, we've tested more. Now, I don't know what Mike Pence said, but I'm sure he could answer that question.
He said 4 million tests, and we're 6 weeks later.
You ready again? We've tested more than every country in the world, even put together. So that's all I can say.
You know, just because you say it again and again and again doesn't make it true.
Well, I mean,
and it's just people can see it. The president, somebody ought to let the president know that people can see that the testing is not there for them. There's 320 million people here. 4 million at this point is pitiful. This is way lower than the president, the vice president, and his team promised. It's pitiful, most believe, because the states are all competing and trying to get tests from places like South Korea, which did it right. And we still look way behind because there's no nationalized coordinated effort. That's the feeling that most have. And if you're a governor of a state, you're frustrated because you're in this situation and the president could change it. So as much as he has these briefings, which are really campaign rallies where he's trying to get the cat light to go this way and that way for the media and appeal directly to his people, many of them will be impacted by the coronavirus. And his people won't be able to get tests. And his people will end up in hospitals and on ventilators just as much as anybody else. He can't fight this reality with his mouth.
Well, so his people, it's all of us. We've got one president. And if he gets testing right, then we can get back to work. If he gets testing wrong, then you're going to have people getting back to work before we're ready. More people dying, and as his own CDC director said, just absolute devastation in the fall. But Willie, this goes to the disconnect. Like, the president has to know that seniors are watching him. And when he talks about more tests than anybody else, they know that per senior, per person, per capita, the United States of America, the most technologically advanced, the most medically advanced, the most scientifically advanced nation in the world, is far, far behind other countries when it comes to testing per patient, testing per person, testing per seniors. It's like, it's like comparing Delaware and California. California can say, yes, we have more of everything, but maybe you don't per capita, and maybe that hurts California on this way. But again, he makes these wild claims that, he knows they're misleading, and senior citizens know he's misleading, and that's why we see these poll numbers, poll numbers among seniors tanking. We see his poll numbers, among others, tanking. We see people disagreeing with him on a lot of issues here, and he's still trying to spin this alternate reality. And again, I'm genuinely baffled that this guy who has been so good at reading the base instincts of Americans is getting this one so wrong politically.
Yeah, it's another point of internal conflict when he says on the one hand that we're overstating. Remember, he said in that tweet, testing, testing, testing. It's all people harp about. And then he says, but we have the most tests in the world. As a raw number, that's true, of course. As a per capita number, not even close, of course. The problem is Americans, as you say, know what they're seeing out their front door. They know what they're seeing in their town, in their state. And that is, there is no testing. There's very little testing where they live. And there were $25 billion put into this new bill that you and Jonathan Lemire were just talking about that the president is expected to sign for testing. But what does that mean? We're going to pump $25 billion into testing. Is that a new federal program? The president has said he doesn't think it's up to the federal government to run a testing program. It should be up to the states. So that leaves people like, as Mika just alluded to, Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland, Republican of Maryland, to have his wife, who is of Korean descent, born in Korea, Korean American now, a citizen here, calling friends in Korea, calling people she knows, and because of their relationships in South Korea, the state of Maryland gets 500,000 coronavirus tests. That's the kind of ad hoc testing and acquiring of tests that's having to go on. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio doing the same thing. The city's going to start its own program. In the meantime, getting a company in Indiana to send some tests their way. So there is no national testing program. The president can brag about the raw number, and that's true. But in a country of 330 million people, the number actually is paltry, and every medical expert, including the ones who stand next to him every day in the White House briefing room, say we've got to test the country, know who has it, before we can get us opening for business again.
Well, let's bring in John Heilemann. John, I'm going to make a request, and I have a question for you. Also, Mike Barnicle is here, of course, and Senator Claire McCaskill.
Well, we have John Heilemann.
I know people, which, by the way, people on Twitter all day talk about.
Upset about that, right?
About John Heilemann's backgrounds and how the fruit is laid out. I got to see this fruit. How the fruit is laid out perfectly on the table. It is a hipster's
people
kitchen.
People got a lot of time on their hands, Joe. A lot of time on their hands. A lot of time on their hands.
I also see
the apple today. The apple today is going to get a lot of commentary.
There's also words, if you read the backwards over the door, I buried Paul. But there's a lot of things to read in the background there. This little Beetlejuice, folks. I'm just curious, John Heilemann. First of all, could you give us one of those awesome calendars from the recount on the lies? And I'd like to say the claims. They're just lies. So I got to call them lies. The lies that the president and Mike Pence have made about testing. First of all, that's my request to you. Could you guys make a calendar, because they have lied so often? And in my personal calls with people running the White House, say, "Oh, Joe, you're going to love what we tell you on Tuesday," and on Tuesday they tell you nothing. That's like a month and a half ago about testing. Could you do one of those nifty calendars, because I think it really effectively shows Americans how long senior citizens have been lied to.
I'm going to work on that, Joe, and I'm going to do a special version that's going to be like an advent calendar. So not only do you get to see the lies and corresponding dates, but then at the end you can punch into each one of the dates and have a little piece of chocolate.
I like that a lot. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And now let's talk. You know, we've been talking about medicine for a long time. This is a show that is a show that's been talking about that's talked about politics for 11 years, 12 years. Let's talk. I think because it's what the president understands, and because the president can't quit us, he watches the show all the time. Let's talk about the politics of the president's press conference. I've been saying for a long time that it really hurts him politically. I think the numbers are showing that in the polls, but I've been especially focused on how senior voters who have been bedrock of support for Donald Trump, how they must be watching this as the president's top economic advisor says, let's open up. You know what? Death is part of life. Lieutenant Governor of Texas basically saying the same thing. Yeah, grandparents would die if we get the economy started again. Stephen Moore, also an economic advisor for the president, informal at least, who he tried to put on the Fed board, also basically saying the same thing, talking about people protesting and endangering the lives of senior citizens were the, quote, Rosa Parks of this generation. I could go on and on. I mean, a Catholic journal that talks incessantly about being pro-life, talking about, well, hey, death is part of life, so let's just relax about death and get the economy started. I go on and on and on and on. But these people are talking about, just sacrificing the greatest generation, sacrificing Vietnam vets, sacrificing them so the stock market will go up and the 401ks will be strong. I think as a young Southern Baptist in youth groups, I think they told us back in the 1970s and 80s that was called euthanasia.